Welcome to Podcast Like It's the 2000s, the podcast where we talk about the films and / television of the aughts from our perch here in 2025. I'm one of your hosts, Phil Isco.
I'm your other host, Emily St. James. And a fun fact about me is that tonight I will also be playing the roles of Phil Isco, Adam B. Very, and Job's wife. So look forward to that.
I love that.
I'm very talented.
No rabbi? Really? I
didn't want to presume as a Gentile.
Cultural
I was like, that felt,
sure.
Yeah, I could play
Crossing
Phil.
lines.
I can't play a rabbi. Yeah.
Sure. With us today to continue our miniseries on Mike Nichols films and TV of the 2000s is senior entertainment writer for Variety, Adam B. Very, to talk with us about Angels in America Part 1, Millennium Approaches. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me here. I was very excited when you reached out to ask me to do this because I was saying off mic, it was a real pleasure to be able to revisit this, and I had actually already revisited it like right before you'd reached out to me. So yeah,
So Emily, you've seen a staged version of this.
Yes, I saw an amateur version, which wasn't very good, but then I also saw the Nathan Lane, Andrew Garfield, Denise Gow was in that production, Lee Pace. And that was wonderful. I did the thing where you saw it all in one day. I got a nice meal in between at a nice little Italian restaurant, came back, cried my eyes out. Great show.
Did you see that version, Adam, by any chance?
No, I didn't. I never got. My first introduction to it was I read the play in college. My freshman year, I took a intro to theater class, and we read it. And the woman who was teaching that class was playing the angel I went to Miami University, which is in Ohio, which is like 45 minutes north of Cincinnati. It's named after the Miami River. The Miami tribe was up there before they were down in Florida. They sell a shirt at Miami saying Miami was a university when Florida was owned by Spain. It's a whole thing. Anyway, they shout out to my alma mater. And she was playing the angel in a production of Millennium Approaches in Cincinnati. And so I went down with, I think, a couple other classmates to see that production. And that's the only staged version I have had the opportunity to see. And it was only Millennium Approaches. They were going to do Perestroika, I think, the next season.
Yeah.
So forgive me, and I'm sure you guys will know this. How many Broadway versions of this have there? Like, how many sort of
There have been two
professional?
There's been just the two, the original and then the revival with Nathan Lane and Andrew.
They've done a number of them off Broadway or at like major regional American theaters, but it is such a thing to mount this show because you kind of can't, like, when you get a Nathan Lane, you kind of can't be like, okay, come back next year and continue playing. You kind of have to do the whole thing if you want to keep a cast that will draw audiences in. So it becomes a thing where you're learning on stage. I think it's a 7-hour show ultimately. So you're learning this enormous thing and putting it on and finding a way to mount it and finding a theater space for it. I will be surprised if it's a classic of the American theater. It's going to be mounted again on Broadway, but I'll be very surprised if it's mounted more than one more time in my lifetime on Broadway.
Broadway. But
sorry,
like what's interesting, like to Emily's point, when the Broadway revival was going on, there was another revival happening in San Francisco where I think I'm right, where Stephen Spinella, who originated the role of Pryor, was playing Roy Cohn. Which is, and so I think it was sort of kismet that they just wound up going at the same time. But you could have flown to, like, you could have gone to see one and then flown to the other coast and seen the other if you were so crazy to do it.
And that's what I did. I saw Millennium Approaches in New York. I pulled a Hannah Pitt. I flew and did Perestroika in San Francisco.
That sounds right. Sounds right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the sort of iterations of it that Wikipedia has of this sort of grid.
Harper Pitt. My God, I got my reference wrong.
You got your right. The world premieres in 91. with, quite frankly, a bunch of people that I don't know, and I don't say
It's
that
like
derisively, but
a thing I always like to point out is that the
yes,
world premiere of this show was in Los Angeles.
correct.
The Mark Taper Theater here put on the first production of it, which is like the weirdest possible place to mount this show. LA is not like LA's a good theater town. It is not a great theater town, but
Right.
this is our claim to fame, I guess.
With the same, so Steven Spinella is prior in this 91 world premiere version of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then he's again prior in the Broadway premiere of it. It's him, Joe Mantello, David Marshall Grant, Marcia Gay Harden, Roy Liebman, Jeffrey Wright. Right. So those are that's in 93. That's the sort of original Broadway version of it. Obviously, we get the HBO miniseries in 2003. Then there are 2 off-Broadway revivals that exist in 2010. Zachary Quinto, Adam Driver are in those versions. They're Lewis in the 2 different versions, which is crazy to think of. Interesting.
I think Adam Driver.
The mind boggles. Adam Driver as Lewis. The mind boggles.
But like, amazing.
Yeah.
Michael Urie was prior in that version.
Oh,
okay.
Which, I mean, sure. Yeah. Zoe Kazan played Harper in one of those off-Broadway versions. Billy Porter was Belize in both those Broadway versions. And then we had the sort of second London revival and the first Broadway revival. That's the one that I think you guys saw. That's Andrew Garfield and Lee Pace, Nathan Lane, and such.
One of our guests, I was Emily Hughes last week. We talked about she saw that and she was kind of bad mouthing Andrew Garfield, and I thought he was quite good.
Okay.
I thought, here's the thing: Nathan Lane is just like blowing everyone off the stage in that production, but like. Sure. I was really impressed with how well cast it is because a lot of the people in it were not people I'd heard of before. Denise Gow, who's now well known to everyone from Andor, where she played what's-her-face, the baddie.
Dedra Miro.
There we go, Dedra Miro. Yes. When I saw she was cast in that, I was like, oh, because I was so excited because she honestly did my favorite version of Harper's big monologue from part 2.
Oh, really?
I really,
the plane,
yeah. I really have tried to find it online and have not been able to, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But like she was a revelation. There are all these people I hadn't really heard of in smaller parts. And weirdly, the weak link was Lee Pace. He just kind of felt like he was a little too old to play Joe. Yeah.
At that time, that doesn't track.
Yeah. I could see like Pushing Daisy's version of Lee Pace.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that
Lee Pace as Joe makes sense. 2018 Lee Pace as Joe kind of just didn't work. Yeah.
No,
did you guys Russell Tovey played Joe in the London production, and this may be apocryphal, but I really hope it isn't. There was a night where because famously in Perestroika, Joe strips completely naked, and apparently when Russell Tovey stripped completely naked, his endowment was so impressive that it caused every night it was like causing a bit of a sensation. And I might be making this up, but part I know is true. This part I might be making up, but I feel like somebody fainted. Like there was like somebody like just passed out.
I mean, listen, impressive. I'm impressed.
When they recast it for the United States, they're like, we need smaller dicks.
Smaller dicks. We'll lose people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is really, so I'll be perfectly honest. I did not know. I knew of Angels in America when this miniseries was announced. Obviously just being in the arts in any way, shape or form, it is this totem, this thing, this sort of like totemic, amazing thing. But I didn't really know a ton about it. Like I knew it was about AIDS. I knew that it had magic realism. And then when this was announced with this, unbelievable cast, Mike Nichols directing it on HBO, when HBO was really cresting, right? Like this is the real peak of the HBO mountain at this point, which we'll talk about. But so I was just incredibly excited for this thing. And I remember the only way I could watch it, because as our listeners know, I'm from Toronto originally. So we don't have or at the time.
Wait, you're from Toronto?
Yes, Adam, I'm from Toronto. I know.
Sorry. I think I do that joke every time I'm on.
It's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's better than the bit that David has to deal with London on Blank Check. So all that being said, I the way I watched it was because I had a friend who had an illegal cable situation and recorded them on VHS for me. So that was how I watched them. At least, the first time. And it absolutely blew me away. I became obsessed with it and still am to this day. But I'm sort of curious. You guys obviously saw it staged after this miniseries aired.
I didn't. I saw it staged before.
Oh, interesting.
Because I was a freshman. I appreciate you thinking I'm younger than this, but I was a freshman. When I saw it, it would have been 97 or 98 on stage.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I was. But so you, Adam, had an appreciation for the play prior to seeing this. Emily, you had not seen anything.
I had not seen it. I had read it.
You read it.
Okay. I had read it religiously, just for fun in college. I used to read plays for fun because that was a thing that I did. And this and the play Proof were the two that I just read over and over and over again. And I realized watching this that my style of writing dialogue is so heavily influenced by Tony Kushner. I have always assumed it's just a watered down Joss Whedon, like most of the writers of my generation. And it is that somewhat. But the thing that Tony Kushner does where he's he'll be like, did you read about it? The recipe or whatever, where it's already been established beforehand, but the word circles back in as the sort of
sounds.
Yeah, how that rhythm goes, which is it's vaguely similar to how Sorkin writes. It's a very stagey way of writing, but I think Kushner does it in a way nobody else does, except for me, obviously, because
you've mastered the language in every.
But yeah, I watching this for the first time since it aired, because I loved it. I loved it at the time. I was so happy to have been exposed to it. And then I really I love this as a TV project. I think it works better as a film than Wit does. Wit, I think, is wonderful in its own way, but it is so stage bound. And Angels in America kind of has a thing in it where it wants to be a movie just a little bit because it has scenes happening simultaneously. Sure. At the same time, though, there is something about it where the stuff with the angel becomes so literal on screen, and in a way I kind of want that stagecraft. So I loved revisiting, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's one of the great pieces of American television, and also I think I probably still slightly prefer it as a play.
So just to rewind very quickly, Emily, how excited are you to cover the film Proof? Because that's a 2005 movie, so I guess at some point we'll be talking.
I never saw that. I saw the original Broadway cast. Just loved every second of it.
Who was
my
in that
wife?
Cast? Do you remember?
Mary Louise Parker.
Mary Louise Parker. That was the thing she did before she did this. And Libby loved that play. I loved that play. And then the movie came out, and we were both we're not going to see that.
I am hoping to see the revival with Io Adebri and Don Cheadle, which is going up in Broadway in the spring, which I'm excited to see. But anyway, so Adam, how did you feel when this was announced, knowing what you knew about the play, and sort of, were you excited? Were you trepidatious about whether or not this would actually translate? Did you? Because I mean, this was many people tried to climb this mountain to adapt this thing. So,
I'm just putting myself back in that mindset, because my history with this is a little unusual, because I mean, as listeners to this show may know, if they religiously follow my appearances only, Tony Kushner's husband, Mark Harris, is a friend and mentor of mine, and he and I have been on a previous iteration of this show for everyone to yell at me for my opinions about being John Malkovich. And so when I met Mark as an intern at Entertainment Weekly, in the summer of 2001, which was the summer that Mike Nichols mounted a production of The Seagull
With
and
Meryl.
with Meryl. That was famously like you could not go see it, and because
It was impossible, is what you
it
mean.
was impossible that like you had to wake up 2 days before to like get in line or so. It was just crazy. It was crazy to
It's like the people that have seen it are like, I got to see it. It's like, yeah.
yeah, it was insane. And what I remember like so uh this is a very long-winded story and I apologize, but
No, please.
where the interns sat was near the desk of one of the sort of junior-ish like editor reporters who covered a lot of theater on top of her regular job. I wish I spent all day trying to remember her name and I couldn't conjure it, so I apologize. Um, and there was a day that Mark walked in, and it was like this, and it was in like the newsroom bullpen space, whereas most of the people at EW had their own offices. It was back in the sort of halcyon days of print journalism when
Magazines existed.
magazines existed and people had like actual physical like private spaces to themselves.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I was in the sort of bullpen where a lot of the sort of like designers were and the sort of junior level staffers. And Mark walked in, and Mark at that point was the assistant managing editor, one of them of EW, and said to this woman, "Hey, we need someone to review The Seagull, and I can't do it. Can you do it for me?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then and then he left, and she was like, did you did anyone else see what just happened?" And that's when I learned that Mark couldn't do it because there was something brewing with Mike Nichols and Tony. At this point, Mark and Tony, I can't remember if they'd done their marriage ceremony yet. I don't think they had. So I think they were just coupled. But that Tony was working on something with Mike Nichols.
Mhm.
And one doesn't have to be a genius to deduce what that might be. So I had a sort of inside track of knowing that something was up before it was officially announced. At least that's what I haven't gone back and fact checked any of this, so that might have been announced. It might have been announced already. I don't know. But this is
does the name Melissa Rose Bernardo sound right?
That's it. That's who it is. That's who it was.
Emily pulling
Detective.
it out. Look at you.
Oh my God. Did you look up who wrote the review? Because I don't.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I could have done, and I didn't do it.
I actually accessed your subconscious because I am playing you. Yeah.
So that's a very long way to. That's a very long-winded way of answering your question, but basically,
you had an inkling this was coming way before.
This was coming, but I didn't know the cast. You know, I didn't know it was going to be Meryl and Emma and Al Pacino, and so like when that was announced, I was very excited.
Sure.
By the idea. I think I remember wondering, ooh, will the star power overpower it?
Yeah.
But I was like, well, I mean, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna get the best you can possibly get. And so
well, it's also, I mean,
it does look like they announced it in 2002, so you were ahead of the game there.
I was
at least 6 months ahead of the game. Yeah. I do think as well, because like our listeners, I mean, depending on how old they are, I mean, the HBO miniseries right now is such a staple, right? The miniseries, by and large, the limited series, the what have you, is totally different in the current television landscape than it was certainly in the 90s and even in sort of the early 2000s. Like these just weren't really doing something of this magnitude with movie stars of this level. Like they were. I'm not saying that they weren't doing anything like this, but this feels like big. Broke new ground.
Big deal. It was a big deal that Al Pacino and Emma Thompson and Meryl Streep were doing television.
Right.
I do think like the thing that gives HBO the idea it can do stuff at this scale is Band of Brothers, which I don't want to like overlook. It's this huge thing for them but that was like they were not casting the biggest stars in the world. They were casting kind of unknowns, and they were using the name.
Excuse me, they had David Schwimmer. So
That's true.
They did have David Schwimmer.
Let's not go crazy.
But I think to your
Who
point, Emily,
should David Schwimmer have played in this?
Jesus.
No.
Lewis, probably.
He's he's kind of
but I think your point with Band of Brothers, Emily, is obviously that the Spielberg and Hanks of it all is what they were really riding on, and they didn't feel the need to cast for it. And I do think that it's so obviously I'm reading or rereading Mark Harris's biography on Mike Nichols as we sort of incrementally go through this portion of his career. And it is interesting to sort of read about how, and as our listeners have discovered, what planet are you from being just a disaster of a magnitude that's sort of hard to even really comprehend. And really, I mean, if we're being real, put him in movie jail. I think that's a safe assumption, or at least close to it. And then he does Wit, which opens this HBO door. And obviously this starts to percolate while he's making Wit. And I think that, to me, he's discussed, I mean, he's obviously no longer with us, but he's talked about this was the culmination of everything he had done in his career. You know, it really felt like that all coming to fruition.
Can I just do a quick sidebar on What Planet Are You From, a movie that we all love? And
Why? We did a whole episode on it.
I forgot that when I recorded Blank Check with Griffin and David, at the end of that episode, I was promoting this show. Griffin like talked about how he kind of liked What Planet Are You From?
I know.
And I was like, at last, someone who's seen the truth.
The person.
Someone who's seen the truth.
Also, it should surprise you not an iota that Griffin Newman would be the one person to support that movie.
But
totally tracks.
Yeah, 100%
tracks. Yeah.
I
remember that moment, Emily. Actually, I'm remembering that moment listening to that, being like, that makes sense. Of course, Griffin likes that.
Of course,
movie.
He likes that movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember, like, Mike Nichols has never been one of my guys. I like him just fine. You know, I've liked some of his films a great deal. I've liked other films a lot less. But I remember feeling like if anybody was going to pull this off who wasn't Robert Altman, who famously they tried to make it with Robert Altman for years, didn't happen. It was going to be him, because he's very good at straddling the line between theatricality and cinematic quality in a way that like few other directors have ever been able to. And this project really requires a sense of everything is happening at the same time. That's very filmic, while also like a heightened layer of reality that's very theatrical.
This is, I think, a great time to dive into, like, I think the fundamental thing that Michael Nichols did with this production, which is he brought it down to the camera instead of having it for the stage. And like, and the reason this is part of what I was really excited to talk about, because when this aired on HBO, I was living in West Hollywood in this sort of a 6-unit complex that was sort of tucked off of Fairfax Avenue, that the sort of centered, the way it was arranged, there was like one apartment that was sort of the center of everything. And still very good friends of mine, and they cultivated this sense of like this sort of gay place that people could just come. Like people like it was just a place where like if you lived there, if you didn't live there, you would show up. Like you'd show up on Thursday night to watch Will and Grace, you'd show up on Sunday night to watch whatever was on HBO. Sure. And he even had a sign that said Barbary Lane South. It's a reference to Tales of the City. So his name's Doug. Doug had seen, like, I think at least 2, if not 3. I think he'd seen the original Broadway production of Angels in America. So he was fully like thrilled about it. And he had a real problem with this miniseries, because especially the actors who no one had heard of, Justin Kirk and Ben Shankman, and to a lesser extent, Patrick Wilson, that they were underplaying everything. And part of like one of the things that people had an issue with Andrew Garfield's performance is that he was not playing to the back of the theater. He was playing to the people who were in the lobby, Like he's giving a
Right.
full theatrical performance,
Uh-huh.
and there's a sense of that is who that is who Pryor is. And what Mike Nichols did,
Yeah.
and I think especially in the rewatching, to amazing effect, was he had everyone play it like they were just in life, and
Yep.
they were just talking. They weren't performing, they were just talking to each other. And that um his because the language that Tony Kushner uses is so florid at times and so dense that it can be very intimidating to, I think, directors who are much more visually driven. But Mike Nichols, because of his background in theater, I think you're right, Emily, had the facility with the language in a way that was going to be able to give it over to somebody who's sitting on their couch watching it. Not even
Sure.
in a movie theater, they're sitting on their couch. So he knows instinctively, I think, that the performance has to meet the person there. And so they have to, like, he just brought it all way down.
What I
Well, I think
find
there's an art. Sorry, go ahead.
what I find fascinating is that Kushner's like great cinematic relationship is with Steven Spielberg, probably the most
Yeah.
visually
Yeah.
thought through director of ever, but definitely of his generation. And like Nichols is not a strong visualist in the same way.
No.
Like that's fine. His strength is working with actors and things like that. But like Kushner's still writing these literate, dense Kushner scripts, but Spielberg is like giving them the full Spielberg treatment. I don't know. I'm fascinated by how the directors who work well with him are either people who kind of just sit down and shoot the script with actors delivering it beautifully, or directors who are like, I'm just going to tell this story visually, and your dialogue is going to be there to like complement the visual storytelling.
Right. I
And the
mean,
thing that's interesting is Spielberg has done both versions. Like
Mhm,
Munich is the visually intensive version, and
mhm.
Lincoln is where he's like, I'm just going to watch these actors act, like
Yeah,
for a lot of it.
mhm.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that. I mean, I certainly can't think of another director who has so successfully transferred theatrical productions to cinema.
Hmm.
Um, it's generally speaking. I mean, I think Emily. We've covered Glenn Ross. I'm trying to think if we've done any other plays. I'm sure we have. I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
Hmm.
But
I
it
mean,
is
Encino Man. Let's not
okay.
forget that one.
Obviously, everyone's favorite play in cinema. But I mean, Wit is obviously another example of it. But
Yeah.
it is just really interesting to see how to agree with both of you here that first of all, I think this is one of the more visually striking things that Mike Nichols has ever made, right? I
Mhm.
mean, Stephen
Hmm.
Goldblatt shoots the hell out of this thing. He obviously has an enormous budget. The production, specifically in the messenger arriving portion, is pretty gobsmacking. You're really just sort of like, holy shit, they're doing this. I understand that it might not be fair. It is very theatrical. Like
Yeah.
it can be a little bit silly.
Mhm.
Um, but you know your mileage will vary on one thing I noticed watching it this time is the series kind of slowly gets you to full magic realism. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's dipping its toes there and being like preparing you for the fact that a fucking angel's going to come through the ceiling and have sex with pride. Like it's going to be crazy, and I think they're kind of prepping you for that.
I mean, it's just directly from the play, it is a thing where I think in the theater you can do stuff like this a little more easily, but like it is like trying to get you used to a certain kind of theatrical
Mm-hmm.
staging, if you will, and then it is slowly breaking that open. And I do think Nichols found a smart way to translate that to film. But like I think there's this famous scene in part one called the Democracy in America scene, which like originally was like 30 minutes long.
That's
Like
Lewis in the diner
it's
with
Lewis and
Belize.
Belize
Yeah.
in the diner, and they're talking about basically it's kind of like, is racism over,
Yeah.
is it like harder to be queer or Jewish than black, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera. And like it does feel a little bit like Tony Kushner like trying to get out ahead of his limitations in viewpoint, which he
Mm-hmm.
has as someone who is
Mm-hmm.
not a black American, but
Sure.
also like apparently was very long and punishing for a long time, and then like they paired it back to what you see in the stage show and in the and on screen. but like Nichols doesn't just kind of stays out of the way of that. It is a dense, literate scene of people talking about politics, and he breaks it up on stage. It kind of just plays out, and here he's breaking it up with other things. But like he's just letting people talk about politics and like the nature of oppression in America for like 7-8 minutes.
It's and was the first scene they shot of
Hmm.
the entire miniseries.
Great.
And
Good.
Nichols
What a way
was
to
like,
start.
I made a terrible, terrible mistake. And they had to reshoot the whole thing.
The Angels in America book underlines that everyone who does that scene is like, I've made a terrible mistake, because it's just like a dense, really politically heavy piece of theater in the midst of what is ultimately kind of a fun sort of comedic show that has deeper, darker themes, but doesn't go to that level right away, you know?
Well, the thing about that scene that's also it's a very tricky scene to do, because there's the intellectual conversation that's happening that is like people have all the time, but it's really hard to make it feel dramatic or compelling. And the thing that Kushner does is it's a character beat. Lewis is revealing himself more to the audience, as is Belize. This is one of the, like, we've met Belize by this point, but this is the first scene where Belize really reveals who Belize is. And so you get a sense of who they are and what the tension is between those characters, and what the and like the unspoken and then spoken tension of prior in the conversation. And all of that is baked fully into that scene. But also, like, on top of like the fact that Kushner cut that scene down for the theatrical, he also cut that scene down for the screenplay. Like, if you read there are whole sections in the script that are dense as hell, where Kushner, and I don't know the history of like how he decided to adapt his own play, but it's very clear that either he or he in partnership with Mike Nichols, like, understood that like each of these scenes, we have to get at like what is the essence of what is the most important thing that's being communicated, and then there's all this other Kushnerian stuff that they largely sort of,
well, they have to prune it down to something.
Prune it away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, obviously we're jumping around, but I do think that it's an incredible scene in a bunch of ways. And really, I mean, from 30,000 feet, we sort of touched on this a little bit, Adam, before we got on mic. But, you know, when I first pressed play on this and I first started watching it, I'd be lying if I wasn't sort of like, 2025 America right now, it's hard to watch this. And then some kind of a switch got flipped for me, and at a certain point I started to see the optimism in this piece to some degree. And I started to see like how it's about, you know, not giving up, and that it's, you know, it's the push towards some sort of justice, and it's hard to obtain, obviously, and lots of people will suffer in the process. But I did find myself sort of, and I bring this up just because in this scene in particular, you have sort of Lewis talking about how power is the object, not to be tolerated. This idea of people of that without power, real power, you can't actually make real change. And this idea of sort of queer people being tolerated by liberal people and what have you is offensive in its own way. There's just so much going on. It's just it's crazy how much is packed into 5 minutes of screen time.
It's also in Roy's speech to his doctor as well. Yes. Like, you know, I'm not a gay man. I'm a straight man who fucks around with guys because I have clout, and gay men don't. So I'm not a gay man. Like, ipso facto, like he is reducing the identity of homosexuality to its political dimension, not to its innate personal dimension. And that is riven through the entire piece. Like that the tension of personal identity versus political identity versus religious identity versus racial identity. It's all of these things colliding. And the thing that is, like, you know, watching it in 2025, well into the new millennium, when like that the line that the homeless person says to Harper, not
in the future, everyone will be insane.
Hannah.
In the future, everyone. Hannah Pitt. In the future, we will all be insane. I'm like, Well,
Oh.
memo from the future.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. So like, you know, this is like it really does feel like he had his like finger on the pulse of like where we're headed.
Sure.
You know, setting it in the 80s, written first performed in the 90s. This is performed right after the new millennium has started, post 9/11.
Yep.
And I think that had that resonance then. But now with, you know, Trump in the White House, who was
Well,
the protege of
well, I
Roy
was just gonna
Cohn,
say, like, you could never have
like,
known that Roy Cohn would be
yeah,
the
the line that he has to Ethel Rosenberg, where he's like, you know, I have weaseled my way into history. You're never going to get rid of me. I was like, oh God,
oh God.
oh God,
Um,
that's so right.
Before we continue, I do want to give a little bit of context here. I know that people that are listening to this probably know Angels in America, but I do want to just give a little bit of context. Set in 1985, the
It's
film
about
revolves.
angels in America, Phil. Come on.
It is. It is. Set in 1985, the film revolves around six New Yorkers whose lives intersect. At its core is the fantastical story of Prior Walter, played by Justin Kirk, a gay man living with AIDS who is visited by an angel, as well as his lover Lewis, played by Ben Shankman, best friend Jeffrey, played by Jeffrey Wright, a closeted gay Mormon lawyer Joe Pitt, played by Patrick Wilson, his Valium-addicted wife Harper, played by Mary Louise Parker, powerful conservative lawyer Roy Cohn, played by Al Pacino, and Ethel Rosenberg, played by Meryl Streep. The film explores a wide variety of themes, including Reagan-era politics, the spreading of the AIDS epidemic, and a rapidly changing social and political climate. Angels in America aired on HBO from December 7th to the 14th in 2003. First episode drew 4.2 million viewers, making it the most watched cable show of the year. It broke a miniseries record at the time held by Roots, winning 11 of its 21 Emmy nominations. It has an 8.1 audience score on Metacritic and a 4.3 rating average on Letterboxd. The New York Times said that Mike Nichols' television version is a work of art in itself. The Boston Globe said that Mike Nichols and a magnificent cast led by Meryl Streep have pulled a spellbinding and revelatory TV movie out of the Tony and Pulitzer Prize winning work, and that he managed to make Angels in America thrive on screen. And IndieWire ranked the series first on its list of best LGBTQ TV shows of the 21st century. There you go. Emily, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I understand.
I just wanted to get that out of the way for
angels
people to, you know,
there's angels and they live
there's
in
angels
America.
in America, and you know, yeah.
I think have been rereading like contemporaneous pieces about this. A lot of like less reviews and more reporting on it. And what's fascinating is how they're all like, HBO's in a bit of a pickle right now. And it's like HBO certainly was like at its cultural zenith to that point. But if you go and read those articles, they're like Sex and the City is ending in 2004. Sopranos is ending soon. 6 Feet Under is ending soon. All these shows are big. They haven't come up with a show to replace them. And now they're doing this $60 million miniseries. You know, what's up with that? And like that, it is the first time when people are a little bit HBO skeptical. And it is like foreseeing the time like 3 years later when HBO is doing things like Tell Me You Love Me and like all of these like weird little shows that don't hit. John from Cincinnati,
Rome.
And like what saves them obviously is True Blood. But you know, and even when they were doing a show like Rome that had good ratings, it was too expensive to keep producing, and they had this like, so it is an interesting time capsule of HBO was at the top of the world and was doing this big thing, and yet everyone was like, you're going to fall apart pretty soon, aren't you? And like they sort of did, and then they got bigger than ever.
It's also, I'll say this too, because I think that this is part of, I alluded to this earlier, but like the 2004 Emmys, I remember pretty vividly because it was the year that The Sopranos finally won everything. So you had The Sopranos season 5, and you had Angels in America. And it was just this crazy HBO moment of like, we're winning everything. We're running the table now. We've essentially pushed to some degree broadcast television to the side a little bit.
And Arrested Development won comedy, right?
I
like
believe
that was
so.
the year they did.
Yes.
That's a good group.
It's a pretty great
That's
year.
A good group.
It's a great group. But it is just sort of this moment when I do think that it's hard not to see a page being turned. But then to your point, Emily, if you look to the horizon, you're like, well, this is not sustainable. And other people are going to enter the equation and other networks and all this sort of stuff. But I I want to talk about something else that really hit me watching. So I've only watched Millennium Approaches thus far. I'm waiting to get closer to our recording date to watch
Oh,
the second
interesting.
chunk.
Okay.
I've seen it. I can talk about it obviously,
I
but I
just
didn't watch the whole thing.
I want to see something that really fucking bugs me. And that is
Okay.
that they have split this into 6 episodes instead of 2 parts. It originally aired as 2 parts. The plays are 2 pieces. It really bugs me.
No,
It
I
really
know
The
bugs me.
chapter still existed. They just showed it in chunks and they
they
showed it as
they
episodes.
showed it in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yes.
showed that when they first aired, like this is back when there was HBO, HBO2, HBO3, HBO, like all of the different
Yeah.
HBOs. I remember this
Yes.
vividly. And on one of them, you would watch Millennium Approaches, and then
Yep.
and then you'd watch Perestroika. On another, you would watch each one as like its own individual episode. And then I think there was still another that like sliced it even a different way. And I wish I could like I don't
Well,
think it was like all the way through, but it was
this
like there
was
was
part of how they got a
yeah.
green light though. Like
Yeah.
they structured it this way specifically so that HBO had a bunch of different options of ways to air this thing because they were I think HBO was a little bit gun shy about the idea of like America sitting down for over 3 hours in one sitting. But I know what you're saying, Emily. I get it. You
What's
sat
and
through the whole thing in one night, so I mean, come on.
I mean, I got a nice meal at an
You
Italian
gotta.
restaurant in between. It was so good. I
You
loved it. I HBO also won made for TV movie that night. It was the closest any network had come to winning all 4 of the big awards. Arrested
Correct.
Development stood in their way. So take that,
Take
HBO.
that.
Mitch Hurwitz shops at my
Yeah.
grocery
Oh yeah.
store.
Sex in the City. That was the other thing. Sex in the City.
Yeah.
Angels in America. Like they were just fucking crushing it. It was like they came in and they just. It's anyway. But what I wanted to say is that watching it this time, the thing that I was really sort of taken with, or one of the myriad of things I was taken with, was this idea of like how much of the play is about the beauty and fallibility of the physical human body,
Yeah.
the idea of something being otherworldly in the form of obviously religion, angels, God, what have you, versus the fallibility of the human body. I just like there's so much talk of blood and guts and like obviously Pryor's health. There's just a lot of stuff about how fleeting this vessel that we have is, but also how beautiful it is. Like there's just a lot of that there's sort of those two things crashing against each other a lot in this, which I really loved. I don't know if you guys tapped into that or not, maybe not.
No,
But yeah.
it's yeah. I think one of the things that I find fascinating about how Kushner writes in this, especially, but also in some of his work with Spielberg, particularly Lincoln, is that he is interested in the way that human frailty and fallibility will make you sympathize with someone, but he's interested in it more than a physical capacity. Because, like, he will readily admit throughout the show, everyone will be like, Lewis, you're a huge piece of shit. And Lewis will be like, I know, I'm a huge piece of shit. And yet that makes you like him more. It's like this really weird thing that I think a lot of writers would struggle to do. But Kushner, just like by making these characters just sort of open wounds, is able to make them seem human because you're like really relating to the way that they can't quite pull it together, you know?
I mean,
I
that
totally
also
agree.
that to your point,
Yes.
Phil, like one of the things that I think is was remarkable in 2003 was revolutionary in 1993 and in 2025 feels so commonplace that I had to remind myself of how uncommon it was at the time is the casual way with which discussions of sex and sexuality happen throughout the entire piece, both homosexual and heterosexual. Like the this when Harper talks about like this nice like lady on the radio taught me how to give a blowjob, like
Yes. Yes.
there's a casualness with which these people are talking about sex without ever we never really see the act of sex when Lewis and and Joe hook up.
Yes.
Spoiler alert for Perestroika. you see there's the famous part, the part that caused audiences in London everywhere to like have collapse
Fainting
into fits
spells.
of hysteria, fits of hysteria. Like there's moments of nudity, but there's no moments of copulation, but there's just talk of it all the time because I think he wanted the fact of AIDS and the fact of AIDS being a sexual transmitted disease to be just not like the taboo of it. He sort of dispels in the most sort of easy, like everyday kind of just talk about sex the way people talk about sex. The line that Pryor has of like, if I didn't spend 4 years filleting you, I would, Lewis, I would have thought you were straight. Like, it's like just toss off lines like that just like these are sexual beings who have sex or don't in the case of Joe and Harper. And
although when they talk about having sex, when Harper talks about having sex with Joe, and she talks
she
about how
has
it's like
desire.
Yeah.
She has a sexual desire, and she is part of what is causing her to lose herself is this feeling of like this empty feeling of being a unseen in her own marriage sexually as a sexual person. And so like all of that is very much a part of everything that's happening, I think, in
totally
in it.
As a straight curious person, as we know, the thing that scares me away from embracing my heterosexuality every time is the way they say buddy kiss. I'm like, I can't deal with that. I don't. Let's not do that.
Can I just say, when they say buddy kiss, I'm like, this is the most unsexual relationship that's ever been. And of course, they're Mormon on top of everything.
I mean, that's obviously like you're meant to be, I think, skeeved out by the buddy kiss.
I hope so. Yeah.
And the thing is though, I grew up with the people like that. I didn't grow up with Mormons, but I grew up with like within the evangelical tradition. And there were people where the marriage was clearly like a space where it didn't necessarily have to do with queerness or anything like that, but it was a space where like they were both repressing themselves in some way and it was coming out in like weird ways. And like it's so, that relationship makes a certain fundamental sense to me in a way that like really felt like it was reflecting something I had seen in my life on screen in a way I don't think I've ever seen it since or before.
I don't think I've seen anything like
it's a thing that I think is interesting about this show, Angels in America, as a property, as a piece of IP,
oh boy,
is that it is one of the few works that deals with this central tension in American life or any human life that is like, we know that, for instance, the AIDS epidemic was a historical assault on the queer community, especially on gay men, but also on, like trans women and other people in that space. And we can hold that in our heads and also be like, what is happening to the queer community right now is also bad. And there has to be that tension of like holding space for history and also being like, but we don't like what is going on right now also kind of has to take precedence. And I feel like Angels in America, particularly with its treatment of Mormonism, which is this weird group, weird religious sect that keeps getting chased further and further west. And I certainly don't want to pretend that they were not like complicit in all sorts of terrible things, but like that they keep getting chased further west and are keep being persecuted by people. And it has this open heart for everyone who's ever been oppressed by America, which is like a long list of people. But it's also being like, but look at what is happening right now. This is the work we have to do right now. And this is the work that stretches into the future. And that's, I think, what ultimately feels hopeful about it, even though it's like,
I agree.
It will like stare at a lesion on Pryor's body and just be like, look at this. This is the body falling apart,
Well, this is sort of what I was perhaps inarticulately kind of trying to get at earlier, which is that like there's a lot of things that are fascinating about Mormonism, but it's also like very fantastical, right? Like you get like a planet in the afterlife,
it's such an American religion. It's just like, we're throwing together a bunch of bullshit that we read about somewhere else.
And special pajamas. It's like there's just a bunch of shit in Mormonism that I find really fascinating. But then you cross-sect that with what you're talking about, Emily, where it's like you're watching Pryor get examined in a hospital room, and it's just you can't turn away from the physical body and the ailment that's going on in front. It really is. It's incredibly powerful. You bring up the Mormonism thing. I want to just talk about this very quickly, Emelina. 2008 interview, Tony Kushner said that the idea to intertwine Mormonism into the plot of Angels in America started when he saw young, ignored Mormon missionaries near his house in Brooklyn. There were these Mormon missionaries that I used to see at my subway stop in Carroll Gardens around 1983. One of them was, I thought, kind of hot. They were always there in the morning in front of a bunch of people who could have cared less about the Book of Mormon. And I was kind of touched by that, which I think taps into what you're talking about, Emily, of this idea of like, not fringe people, but like people that are just ignored. You know what I mean?
Mormons are hot. Let's just
yeah, sure. I'm sure they're hot
There's
Mormons.
a certain hotness about the underwear, weirdly for me. But like the sort of, I think what you're also getting at is one of the main qualities that I think keeps bringing me back to Angels in America. That like I will go back and will watch just that opening speech that Meryl Streep gives as Rabbi Isidore Chemowitz, which is I think the part that is the most personal for Mike Nichols because of he made that journey, where she talks about the journey that people took from the old world to the new, and that's exactly what Mike Nichols did as a child. I will go back and watch just that part if I'm like feeling big feelings and I need to just sort of like get those big feelings out of my body. I'll get like there are certain things I'll go back and watch, and that's one of them. And I think there's a indiscriminate empathy that is fully throughout this. That is, I think, why, by the way, Tony Kushner and Steven Spielberg have become such good partners, because Spielberg's whole thing is indiscriminate empathy. Like in all, like he is the Roger Ebert maxim, movies are engines for empathy, like writ large into a filmmaker, and this has enormous empathy for every one of its characters, and it has no sentimentality for them because it is fully transparent about all of their worst qualities, all of their most self-defeating, self-damaging, damaging to others decisions and impulses and fears and repressions. And I think the that juxtaposition of like, I have space for all of you, but I'm not going to let you get away with anything, is what makes this feel so huge and such a it's about AIDS. It's about gay men who were dealing with AIDS in the 80s, but it's also about the United States of America as
it's about everything.
It's about everything.
Globe. It's about like everything.
And I think the thing that Mike Nichols is really smart about is that he underplays that mostly, where he lets the sort of those qualities just sort of reveal themselves, as opposed to trying to force them, trying to like overshoot them or make them overly cinematic. And the other thing that I like, when you were talking about the body thing, Phil, rewatching it, I rewatched the last chapter last night. And there's this, and I have very mixed feelings about when Mike Nichols tries to do this sort of grand sweeping visual stuff. I think his facility with visual effects is not good. And I still have an issue with the reveal of the angel. I don't think I don't
really, okay.
It doesn't quite, I was rewatching it. That's part of why I wanted to rewatch it, because I wanted to sort of test for myself, is it playing again? I couldn't put my finger on why it doesn't quite work for me, except that like the scene that happens right before it, where the two like prior spirits of prior appear, right? And it's the second time they've appeared. And Simon Callow giving just an exquisitely, that performance, he was like, go for it, just go as big as you want, and he has a blast with it. They sort of are preparing him for the angel coming, the messenger, and then there's this moment where they invite him to imagine who he'd want to dance with, and Lewis appears. And so there's a close up of Pryor, and his like he looks like awful. He looks disheveled. His lips are chapped. His skin is sallow. He looks off. He sees Lewis come sort of down a very theatrical, sort of classic like 1930s musical stage, wearing a very 80s outfit of like blue jeans.
He's wearing a white button down, tucked in, no belt, a black blazer, and blue jeans.
And blue jeans, very like
Yes,
80s,
very 80s,
like
yeah.
normcore, like
yes.
look. And it cuts back to Pryor, and he is healed. His skin is totally healed. His hair looks wonderful, and that kind of thing, that very subtle, very basic kind of magical realism works incredibly well when he then like, and up to the point where he's dancing and there's this very subtle camera turn, and then all of a sudden Lewis isn't there, and then the camera backs up and he falls, and all of a sudden you cut to the house, his apartment. Incredible. That worked like amazingly well. So then when the next sequence is the angel coming, it like the artificiality of it, and the fact that the visual effects CGI of the early 2000s is one of the like the least
I think it looks
aging
great
well.
still. I think it looks great.
I mean, so I have to read this one part.
Okay.
So I have the script with me. So there's a part with me. There's a part in where, like, as we've been referencing, Pryor's getting examined, and he's talking to the nurse, and the nurse starts speaking in Hebrew, and he's like, "What the hell's going on?" And then he backs up, and then the floor
tablet.
Yeah.
shows
So as written in the script, suddenly there's an astonishing blaze of light, a huge chord sounded by a gigantic choir, and a great book with steel pages mounted atop a molten red pillar pops up from the stage floor. The book opens. There's a large aleph inscribed on its pages, which bursts into flames. Immediately, the book slams shut and disappears instantly under the floor as the lights become normal again. Emily notices none of this, writing, Pryor is agog. So that is quite literally what we see, like down to the letter of what we see in the show. And I wish there had been way more sort of like playful invention of it, as opposed to like this weird CGI moment that is clearly CGI. It plays so false to me in a show that is otherwise so beautifully human scaled. I guess I wanted the big theatrical moments to feel more visceral and real, as opposed to so fake looking.
So
that's my big tie, right? That's
that's totally fair. Here's what I will say, and I'll agree with you insofar as that particular computer generated effect did not age particularly well. I will give you that. That specific moment is 2004 special effects. Yeah. What I don't agree with, I think that what leaves me gobsmacked about when the angel shows up is how much practicality is involved. There is so much set work and builds involved. Yeah. Those wings are real. This is all like tactile. If it was done today, it would look like dog shit. It would look like fucking AI slop, because it would all be computer generated. What I love about it is how much practicality there is in it. But yes, Emily?
I think that it mostly holds up. I certainly like the times when you can tell it's CGI. It's sure. Pretty clearly CGI done on a TV budget, even a very big TV budget in the early 2000s. Sure. I think the fault, because I agree that moment doesn't hit in the way I want it to. It works. I'm not
when
like
the book comes out, or when the angel
when the angel comes down. Oh, like wow, it leaves me a little bit like, and part of it is I've seen it on stage. I've seen it done beautifully on stage, and I love the stage. But some of it is, I think, Mike Nichols' idea of we're going to put this in camera is now being applied to how you would present spectacle in a blockbuster film. Mm-hmm. And that kind of undercuts the purpose of the device in a weird way. On stage, when the angel comes in, it feels like the play has suddenly gained another dimension. You're suddenly just like living in an entirely new space. Like the ceiling has come off and we now realize that the sky is above us. On screen, you kind of can't accomplish that. So he goes for what you would do if you were, any director of a blockbuster, and just leans into the spectacle. And it's a well done spectacle. I do think it like still looks good mostly, but like it does kind of have the feeling of, oh, okay, yeah, cool. It doesn't have that transcendent quality that I want it to have. As I recall, I also have not watched part two yet. As I recall, the stuff in heaven, I think it works.
I remember that
well.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because he shot it in Italy, I think, or France.
On
I think Italy.
stage, the heaven stuff, I'm always kind of like, what are we doing here? What's I like it, but
sure. I'll say this too. I haven't seen the stage production of it, right? And I think the three of us can all agree that being in a physical space with a production is more times than not going to be better than watching it in a movie, right? Or a television show. And I don't know that there's anything that really could have been done in the execution of these particular scenes that we're talking about when the angel shows up that would have achieved what it achieved on the stage. So on some level, I think this is kind of the best we can ask for with this medium. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
I think it's
go ahead.
So I think it's the best you can ask of from this medium from Mike Nichols. I think that to me the issue ultimately, because here's the thing. Yeah. I'm sorry, I keep reading the script. It's so great. So there's the angel starts to appear. Pryor becomes tumescent in his like horniness for the messenger.
Big hard on for our listeners.
Big hard ons. And then here's what's written in the script. There's a great blaze of triumphal music heralding. The light turns an extraordinary harsh, cold, pale blue, then a rich, brilliant, warm golden color, then a hot, bilious green, and then finally a spectacular royal purple. Then silence. Pryor, an awestruck whisper. God Almighty, very Steven Spielberg. And that line plays incredibly well on stage, but they cut it for this because if he's saying very Steven Spielberg out loud and it doesn't feel like Steven Spielberg, you're calling attention to it. And I think honestly, and I'm just being very like, I hear what you're saying about the practicality of it and how that has a really charming quality. I think if they were ever going to like this is where Mike Nichols is like focus on the theatricality of it as opposed to the cinematic quality of it. I do wish he had like Carrie Brokaw or somebody like with him had said, you need to set aside $1 million for just the shot where the roof lifts off and the angel comes in. And because to Emily's point, that if you have just this one incredible moment where you're really like spending like to get the top tier of everything, that would, I think, open it up a little bit. As I litigate a miniseries that is 22 years old.
I like, and again, I'm not like coming down on this. It is like a thing where I feel like this is one of my favorite pieces of TV ever made, and there are places in it where I'm like, it could have,
Sure.
It's also like, I do think one thing I appreciate that this keeps from the Old Testament is that regardless of your sexuality or the angel's gender, when you see an angel, you're like, I kind of want to fuck the angel. I kind of but I think I found myself wondering how Altman would have handled this, because I think Altman would have done something really different. He would have done something more small scale. And like, I wonder, if he would have, because Altman loved to do like a very stagey thing. I wonder if he would have made it like more, now we're suddenly in Dogville or something.
Sure. It would have been naturalistic, I think.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
like I do think it is something about the spectacle. And as we've seen in What Planet Are You From, Mike Nichols is a natural at shooting spectacle. He's very good at it.
He's very good at it. He's very good at using special effects.
But yeah,
Mhm. I'll say this too. Like, I think that I'm trying to figure out the best way to articulate this. For me personally, I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't directors that could have executed these specific sequences, which, if we're being completely frank, makes up less than 5% of this entire miniseries that could have executed.
I'm harping on something that maybe
right. I'm willing to say and give both of you the sort of, yes, there are filmmakers that could have executed those sequences better. I think he did a fine job. I would argue I liked it a lot more than you guys did. And in the grander scheme of things, there are so many fewer filmmakers that could execute the other 98% of this, right? In terms of that translation, that that's obviously I'm willing to take that. That being said, yes. Okay.
I was just going to say, let's talk about how good the actors are. So I don't.
I was literally just. I was gonna. No. I want to pivot to that because I want to just very quickly talk about casting that almost happened. Jodie Foster was considered for Nurse Emily and the Angel, ultimately the Emma Thompson roles, which would have been interesting.
That would have been interesting.
I'm not saying I'm against it for it. I think Emma Thompson's great in this, but that is a person who was considered for it. Dustin Hoffman was the only other person that was really considered for the Roy Cohn role, and notoriously went up to Mike Nichols later on after Al Pacino had been cast. He bumped into him at a party and said, "Al Pacino playing a Jew, really?" Which I think is really funny. I mean, I think I give him some points for that. I don't think that Dustin Hoffman's right for it. I think that Al Pacino is more appropriately cast, but I do have this question for you guys. I think Al Pacino's great in this, but as we all know, Al Pacino's walking a tightrope more times than not, right? Of being like full cartoon character. Yeah. And there are times when the yelling can tip into Dick Tracy or Devil's Advocate at times for me. Not a lot, but there are times. How did you guys feel about it?
I'm fascinated by how he is playing Roy Cohn as a bit of a gay stereotype. Yeah. And getting away with it. Like every time I see him enter and he does his first couple lines, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot he's trying to be, like just like a stereotypical Faye guy. But then like the deeper into it I get, I'm like, oh, he's nailing the like self-loathing in a way that sort of allows him to get away with it. I like a Pacino who yells and then has the opposite end, which is him being able to play the like really like deep hurt. And that's kind of what he increasingly lost across his career. I think is this my favorite performance of his in the 21st century? I think so. Yeah.
Probably.
I mean, I think that he had my memory of watching him in this for the first time was, oh my God, I didn't know he had this in him anymore. Like I thought that he had had gone full just cartoon character, that I didn't realize that he could just bro into a piece and try to disappear into it. And I mean, Roy Cohn is a very yelly guy. And and there are versions of this. Like Emily, I might, from the little I've seen of clips of Nathan Lane, like Nathan Lane is yellier and louder than what Al Pacino is doing in this.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I recall, like from what I've seen of the original production, it's a similar thing with Ron Liebman. I think it is. However, you can get away with yelling on stage a little bit more easily, Yeah.
Every time I rewatch Friends and Rob Liebman shows up as Rachel's dad, I'm like, you were Roy Cohn in Angels in America. This man was Roy Cohn in Angels in America.
Every time
so weird.
Every time I remember he was married to Jessica Walter, I'm just like, yeah,
Also weird.
yeah.
Also, yeah.
I think it should be said, just because I absolutely agree with you, Adam, on the oh my god, I didn't know Al Pacino still had it in him to do this at that time. Because like at this time, he's just done Insomnia, Simone, The Recruit, Gigli. Those are the projects that predate this in his filmography. So he is at
Winners all.
oh,
Winners all.
home runs, all of them. So he's in a real kind of fallow period. And I think this comes out and gives everyone what you're saying, which is, oh shit, this guy's still got the juice. But then he follows it up with like, Ocean's 13 and Two for the Money and Righteous Kill. And, it's right back to doing, shit for money.
It feels like every so often he just gets a role where he's not even varying himself. Like I remember The Irishman, which I really love him in.
Yeah,
he's playing kind of an Al Pacino character, but he again finds that other layer of like this man has like something wounded and human in him. And he just like he so often is just asked to do the big Al Pacino thing. And it feels like that he's often unwilling to like push himself unless he's working with a Scorsese or a Tarantino or something.
The thing he did right after this was The Merchant of Venice. Talk about a stretch of him playing a Jew, but like, but
two of the biggest Jews,
truly, ever on stage. But like, but I remember I've only seen that once, and I saw it in the theater, The Merchant of Venice, the movie theater. You have to specify in this conversation. And I remember also thinking again, like, oh wow, he's like really like giving himself over to Shylock, and this was the thing he did right after. So like at least there was at least a little of an after effect.
What I think that actually leads to interestingly, so in the Mark Harris book, they talk about how crazy prepared Al Pacino was for this. The amount of work he had done before he showed up on set, before he even showed up for a table read. They were just really taken with just the in-depth preparation that he brought to it. Now, does he bring that to everything? Hard to say, but I think he knew that he needed to bring it for this. Yeah. And you feel that. You feel the sort of and apparently he loved to do lots and lots of takes. Mike Nichols is not really a lots and lots of takes kind of guy. He's like, once we've got it, we've got it. And Pacino's like, but I can give you something better. I can give you something different. Like Pacino being this such a giving actor that he wants to give as many options. So when they're in the editing room, they have as much to work with as is humanly possible. I think is lovely and wonderful. And there are not a lot of actors that are like that. Reading all that stuff about what he was like on set and how giving he was really interesting. The other thing too is this was a gargantuan production in terms of the amount of time that was given to rehearsals, the amount of time that was given to prep. And then I think it shot over the course of like 6 to 8 months. Now, admittedly, certain chunks for certain actors based on their schedules and what have you, the less, I don't know, in demand actors, I guess is the way to put it, were there for longer swaths of time. So like, I think Pacino was only there for about a month, and then Meryl was there for about a month, and it was sort of blocked out in such a way. But that just really warmed my heart to think of Pacino of being that much of a giving actor. It was just really lovely to read.
It's interesting to me that a lot of the great work Pacino's done in the 21st century has been on TV. Like he does occasionally he'll just go do an HBO movie and like he's usually quite good in it. It's not like that's not like one of his best performances ever, but I'm usually like more taken with it than I am him in like Jack and Jill or whatever, which I know is heresy to some people. Some people love him in that movie.
People love him in that. Yeah.
But yeah,
some
like
people love that Dunkachino. They want the Dunkachino.
They really do.
But there is something about like it does. I think it is just a function of these mid-budget movies moving toward television across this part of his career. If he wants to play Jack Kevorkian or something, he kind of has to go to TV to do that. And so like the kinds of roles where he really pushes himself increasingly are just on television.
Like Al Pacino, in a different parallel universe, Al Pacino played Roy Cohn in a production of Angels in America on stage, and it, because his film career never took flight, and he stayed as a stage actor. And so I think that's part of why I think it's very clear in just the kind of performance he's giving that he understands what he's been handed and takes and understands that he's going to come to it with commensurate time and attention and care. And what's interesting is like Meryl and Emma have these, like, Al Pacino gets to play the one part that has a full arc.
Mhm.
Emma Thompson and Meryl Streep are playing multiple characters. Emma really is fully fractured. Like she's
Yes.
like the angel is the messenger is not is an abstraction. So she's got to
Correct.
find a way to play an abstraction.
Mhm.
Nurse Emily is, you could have just cast that as, you just could have gotten like an actor who doesn't have the sort of pedigree that Emma Thompson has to just have played that part. And then there's the homeless woman, just the one scene that she has with
Right.
Hannah Pitt. And then Hannah is like the main character that Meryl's playing, but then she comes in as Ethel Rosenberg and she has that incredible opening as the rabbi. And those are also high wire like assignments for any actor to do. And the fact that they both like differentiate themselves so clearly, so carefully, it's really astonishing. Like in the rewatch, and just sort of noticing all the vocal choices they make, the
Yeah.
physical choices they're making, as for each character, it's just astonishing.
It is.
And
It is. I would say that Meryl in particular, and obviously she's really fucking good. Spoiler: she's a very good actor. We all know that. But this is one of those performances that for me, you mentioned earlier about the opening where she plays
yeah.
the rabbi and she gives that speech, which with my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They were very much immigrants post-war, and her performance as Ethel Rosenberg makes me think of my grandmother so much whenever I see it. Just the way that her well, there are certain instances I'll talk about as we get sort of into more specifics, I guess. But it really did that rabbi speech. Watching it today through the current nonsense that's going on with immigration in this country, and watching that speech and thinking about people taking countries and cultures on their back and bringing it to this country, and how beautiful and giving that is, right? Like this is something that is in their nature to sort of want to bring something and expose us to something, and add their culture to this sort of beautiful melting pot of this country is such a beautiful thing. And obviously we're being terrible to these people right now, but it is such a powerful speech, and Meryl as the rabbi is insane. Like, to me, it's a crazy performance. It should not work for a myriad of reasons, right? Like she's playing an old Jewish man with a beard, but there's like, she has phlegm in her throat. She has this way of just embodying this person that is just gobsmacking. There's just nothing like it. I just can't believe she did it.
And it's as scripted. That's
Yes.
the actor who plays Hannah
Yes.
plays Ethel and plays the rabbi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just, for the people that aren't aware.
Yeah.
Sure.
I talk a lot about this. I think I talked about this in our Polar Express episode. But when that movie came out, Robert Zemeckis gave an interview somewhere that I've been trying to track down for years, where he's like, "Wouldn't you love to see Meryl Streep play one of the little girls desegregating the school in Little Rock?" And I'm always like, "No, I would not." But you see a performance like this and you get why people like think she has that range, because again, it's a thing that, like, I think you're right. It shouldn't work, and she's doing all the things you would do if it wasn't going to work, and yet it unquestionably is this beautiful piece of acting, and it's why she's Meryl Streep and why she can kind of get away with anything.
I think there's a, how to put this? I have like 5 different thoughts in my head at the same time. Sorry. I short-circuited there for a second. So first of all, I think part of why that scene works, and we should maybe circle back to this, but the score by Thomas Newman in that sequence.
One of my favorite
with
scores
the whole score is incredible, but like the way that section is scored and the way that it sort of intercuts scenes, contemporaneous scenes of the immigration, like early newsreel stuff, is deeply affecting. So that I think bolsters this performance that you're hearing more than you're actually seeing. She's like you get these quick shots of her, but the camera never lingers, so you're never having to scrutinize the visual. You just get this impression, and then you're left with her vocal choices, which are astonishing. While you get, it keeps cutting to the family listening and how funny this is and how sort of deeply connected they are to it. And one of the sort of little touches, such a Mike Nichols touch, is as the rabbi's reading their names, they keep looking at each other like, he's just said your name. He just said your name. And it's like just like this little thing that families do that you wouldn't necessarily think to include in a sequence like that.
Also, Eric, this is a Jewish name?
This is a Jewish name? And they I think smartly don't cut to Eric being like, what did I do?
They cut to the father laughing.
Yeah. So but I think there's also like, you go in and either that's Meryl Streep going in because you are like, you sort of are aware, or you have no idea, but there's a sort of uncanniness to what you're watching that feels a little outside of, and it's sort of immediately a contract with the audience, both on stage and in the show, I think, that's saying, we're gonna be playing with reality. We're gonna be sort of like, pushing in and out of what is real and what isn't. And we're gonna start this from the word go. We're gonna have an actress playing an old Jewish rabbi, and with like a huge beard and everything. And I'm sure the stage versions, the makeup isn't nearly as incredible as what they do with Meryl, because I think Meryl has such a recognizable face. They have to do a lot, and she's doing a lot with her face and her posture to really sort of demeralize herself.
I mean, you're getting close-ups, right? If you're doing close-up photography, you're going to want that shit to look as good as humanly possible, whereas like theater, it doesn't need to. But I do want to say as well, there is, you also get like Maurice Sendak and Tony Kushner playing rabbis.
Oh my God. I rewatched this last year.
Sure.
It was the last time I was rewatching this on a plane. No, it was in June. It was in June. I was flying with my son to visit my family, and it was one of the options that you could watch on the Air Canada. No, it was not Air Canada. It was Alaska Air. This is really important for your listeners.
I was going to say, it
does not matter. That. Yeah, I'm glad to know this.
I'm glad to know, but thank you.
It's so important for you guys to know this. And that scene comes on, and it's the scene where Lewis is at the cemetery, and he goes up to the rabbi and he says he's already thinking about leaving Lewis. And he tries to get the rabbi to console him, and the rabbi's like, what do you know? I'm not. Yes. Shut up.
Why would a person do something?
Why would a person do such a thing? And also, you're Jewish. I'm not giving you absolution here. You're going to just feel guilt.
Yeah.
And it was only watching it for like, I don't know, the fifth, sixth time that I noticed that Tony Kushner is sitting there with them, and I didn't recognize Maurice Sendak. So I texted.
He's the other rabbi.
Yeah, I texted Mark, and I was Mark Harrison. I was like, I just saw your husband, and I just realized that it was your husband. And he's like, oh yeah, those. And did you know it's also Maurice Sendak? I'm like, no, I had no idea.
It's so funny. It's such a lovely thing. I mean, also Meryl is peeling an apple like circularly. Do you know, like how in one long thing, like Meg Ryan does in Sleepless in Seattle? But it's just like such an old. My grandmother used to do that as well. There's I don't know. There's just like these little things, this old country stuff that's infused into it that I absolutely love. Yes, Emily.
No, I peel my apples that way too.
Oh, do
No,
you?
I don't actually. I have no idea how I would do
God
that.
damn it, Emily.
I feel like
really
I feel like I could learn though. I should learn. That's what
we
I
should
should do.
learn.
That's my New Year's resolution for 2026. Learn how to peel an apple
Learn how to
that
peel
way.
a rabbi,
Yeah.
like the rabbi. I do. I want to just very quickly just also mention Adrian Brody was up for the role of Lewis. He apparently bowed out because he realized that there would be scenes where he would have to perform sexual scenes with other men. Did you read the play? Have you seen the play, Adrian? Why are you even auditioning for this? Like, yes, you're gonna have to kiss a guy.
This is this is the period when like guys of that generation would get cast in a role and realize that it was like some sort of gay thing, and then they would like back out, or they would make either they would back out and make kind of a deal of it, or like they would quietly leave and people would be like, did they leave because of the gay stuff? Or they would be like, I'm the bravest person ever. I have kissed another man. Yeah. Look at me, look upon me.
Look at how brave I am.
Yeah. And
it is interesting. So the Justin Kirk, for very steely-eyed viewers of the film Wolf, will notice that he is in a picture and is playing Michelle Pfeiffer's dead brother. There's a photograph where you actually see him for literally, if you blink, you'll miss him. So he was on Mike Nichols' radar as far back as Wolf, for what that's worth. But he auditions for this role. Same with Ben Shankman. Obviously, Jeffrey Wright, there was never a question. It was always going to be him. And Mary Louise Parker, it was always going to be her. Joe Pitt, there was apparently a moment when it was almost Billy Crudup. I don't know what the current relationship status was of Billy Crudup and Mary Louise Parker at that moment, but it seemed like one of them was expendable.
It's interesting to me that like of the original Broadway cast, everyone was just like, well, of course we're bringing Jeffrey Wright back, and like he won the he won the Tony for playing Belize. Yeah. Like he's like obviously I get why they wanted to bring him. It's just like that is a legendary Broadway cast, and they're like, well, yeah, of course that's the one person.
That's the one we'll pull. Yeah, which I get. I think that Justin Kirk is wonderful in this, and it's surprising to me that in fact that he's so good in this that he basically just kind of like he goes and does Weeds for a few years with Mary Louise Parker, but he kind of doesn't do a ton of stuff. I kind of expected this to be more of a holy shit thing. Like Justin Kirk obviously is now a pretty, he is a successful guy. He pops up in stuff like Succession and he has shows, but like I'm kind of amazed he didn't have a bigger career is really kind of what I'm getting at, because I think he is absolutely phenomenal in this. I really do. The line where he's like, I would personally dissolve if anyone looked me in the eye and said "feh." I think it's just, I mean, he's so good in this. Obviously, Mary Louise Parker is incredible in this. She's right around this time, I think she had just won an Emmy for The West Wing for guest appearance on that. I feel like, all right. How dare you?
I fucking love Mary Louise Parker, and I always have to remember that I came in with such a chip on my shoulder against her because I just was so over The West Wing at that point, and then I saw her improve, and I was like, okay,
Emily. She was nominated, but she didn't win. So you can relax. It's okay. It'll be okay.
All right. Anyway, she's great on The West Wing. You're being snooty. She's great on The West Wing. Anyway, she's in Proof, and then she does this, and then she does Weeds for 8 million years, and I think she won an Emmy for Weeds, didn't she? Am I crazy?
No, she never did. I don't think she has an Emmy. I think she never won
for this.
Oh, right, for this. Sorry, yeah. Beyond this, yeah, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I hadn't realized I had accidentally wandered into a middle of a West Wing. Ongoing West Wing.
I know Emily's feelings about the West Wing. We've discussed it on many occasions. It is what it is. We don't need to relitigate it. But people, if they want to hear it, they can listen to our episode about the West Wing from Podcast Like It's 1999 with Alan Sepinwall and Emily. It's a great episode, and Emily tells us all of her feelings about the West Wing.
You have to admit the West Wing has broken the Democratic Party. Like, you just got to give me that. You got to give me that.
Sure. Fine. I think that Mary Louise Parker, I would argue, who also plays only one role in this. She does not have dual roles.
That is the thing I find interesting is that I was looking at this, and in the stage production, every actor plays at least one other role. Like Roy is only also playing one of the angels in heaven, so like he's not like doing a huge thing. But like they're frequently cast across um, everyone's cast in various parts. And here, Roy and Harper are the two that have nothing else, that they aren't doing anything else. All
Joe
like
also.
Joe is, according to
He's the voice of something, isn't
Joe
he?
He's the
does,
Eskimo.
yeah,
He's the
yeah,
Eskimo.
yeah. Joe does
Yeah,
like
yeah.
some voices, but yeah, it's fascinating that like Harper is it essentially that sort of turns her into the female lead in a weird way, which she
In a weird
kind
way,
of
yeah.
is. It is like her story as much as it is any of these other characters. It's kind of
It's
like
true.
Pryor and her and Joe and Lewis are kind of
Well,
like,
she's
and
kind of
Roy.
the glue
Yeah.
that keeps like Hannah Pitt and like she's sort of pulling that entire storyline together, if that makes sense, or she's kind
Yeah.
of the nucleus
Well,
of
there's
that.
the threshold of revelation scene in the very beginning
So good.
where like Harper's has her drugged out hallucination, and
It's
Pryor
Pryor.
falls into his like fever dream, and they're not sure whose hallucination is in whose, and that they you know, it's this that sort of intersection allows for the like a lot of other
I
intersections.
agree.
It's he's the one who tells Harper that Joe is gay. That launches like that's the catalyst for a lot of things there. She sort of is a wake up call for
Pryor.
Pryor about
Yeah.
how sick he really is, that she can just tell. And so
But
it's
that there's a part of him that's not sick.
that's not sick, that's completely free of
Yeah.
disease.
See.
And so and he doesn't believe it. He
Yeah.
does like, so like I think that
I
and
agree.
also
Yeah.
Mary Louise Parker, more than I think any of these other actors, is the one who makes all of the quieter choices. Very famously, this character on stage is played often big. And how was Denise Go in the Gao? I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
She definitely like she was definitely playing it larger.
Mhm.
But what I really loved about her take on the final speech is that like she plays it in a kind of like smaller, wistful manner that really flips on the ear everything she's doing before. I think what's always interesting about the role of Harper, which is a role I would love to play, and it seems unlikely I'm going to get that chance, as I'm A, not very good at acting, and B, in my 40s. But it's
You'll always be Harper to me, Emily.
thank you. She's always like she always kind of gets dragged toward the energy of Joe, just by virtue of how the role works. And I think, Patrick Wilson is kind of, I don't want to say easy to overlook in this. I think he's wonderful. I think everyone sort of agrees on that. But like there is a steadfast quality to him that is like curdling in real time that like
Mm-hmm.
allows her to go a little bit smaller than this role traditionally goes. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
the two of them work in tandem so well.
I also think I mean, there's a fair amount of magic realism with her character because she is continually hallucinating based on the various
She
psychotropic
goes to
substances that she
Antarctica.
takes.
It's fine. We
She
can
goes to
say it.
Antarctica,
Yeah.
sort of. She also kind of has this sort of hallucinatory moment at the Mormon Center in the second half. But like, there is this sort of it's teed up with the threshold of revelations thing you were talking about, Adam, where it's sort of teed up of like this woman's kind of not grasp on reality, but just that there's this thin membrane, if you will, between sort of reality and fiction for her. And I think that because of that, that's pretty big. Like that's a buy-in for the audience, if you know what I'm saying. And I think that the choice to keep her small and as sort of terrestrial and grounded as possible, I think makes total sense. She has some wonderful scenes in this first half. There's the sort of the first scene where Joe tells her that he wants to move to Washington, and her sort of processing all of that and these fears she has of this man in the bedroom with a knife and all of these kind of fears and of hallucinations and danger and violence and this kind of little bubble that she's living in, this kind of cloistered little drug induced kind of bubble that she's in. um she's amazing. She also has just such beautiful dialogue. Like, people are like planets, you need a thick skin. She has so many just really beautifully sort of florid things that you were talking about. The Couteau inspired dream sequence that you were talking about, where basically Pryor is reading, of course, about Couteau, the filmmaker. So he has this kind of Beauty and the Beast inspired hallucination that Harper commingles with him in, and is just, it's really beautiful. And I want to kind of get both of your opinions on this, because on the Patreon I've been doing Mike Nichols 90s work, and you obviously have the Birdcage. You have Primary Colors, which dips its toe into some of the AIDS culture as well, with, you know, various politicians having gay sex and stuff of that nature.
Stuff of that nature. Yes.
I mean, I don't say with any judgment, but it is just interesting that there is this this thing, and it's in Wit as well, of just sort of disease and fear of mortality that's clearly on Nichols' mind as he gets older. But then the AIDS epidemic mixed into all of this, and gay culture and queer culture and all of that, this being kind of the pinnacle of all of that. But he has been sort of going, and had been going in that direction filmography wise. And I'm sort of curious as to how you guys feel about how he handles this subject matter, considering he is not a queer man, or was not a queer man.
Well, he's the most gay adjacent
sure
like straight man you could probably ask for. Sure. I remember when this was, when the casting for, when I realized that Justin Kirk and Ben Schickman and Patrick Wilson were all straight men playing gay men. In 2003, that, like, there was, like, I couldn't point to a bunch of out actors and be like, just, choose them. And I'm sure there were probably any number of gay actors who were not out publicly, who auditioned for that, who didn't get it on the merit, and then some who decided not to audition for it because they didn't want to get anywhere close to it, and then some who were straight, who were Adrian Brody, who hadn't read the play and realized too late that it was a bunch of gay men. But, like, I think what's interesting to me about this and the Birdcage is that they are both fully, like, similar to what I was saying about, like, the talk of sexuality is just there, and, like, that's a very Kushner thing. The like, you watched other things by straight directors starring straight actors where they're all playing gay, and you get a sense of, like, this feels like somebody looking from the outside in. Like, even something like Philadelphia, to me, as incredible as that movie is, I never quite fully think that it's inside the experience in the same way that we're meant. It feels like it's made for a straight audience, and we're watching inside. Whereas both the Birdcage and this are made in such a way that, like, it's from the inside and the outside. Like, everyone can have an access point inside of it. And I find that to be an incredibly rare quality in somebody who is not queer telling a queer story. Speaking as I'm a gay man. I don't know if that was obvious. And so I'm sorry, earlier I couldn't help, but I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I just have to mention the time that Phil Escove said that,
what did I say?
No, not Phil Escove. Sorry, not Phil Escove. Sorry, Kenny Nybert.
Oh, Kenny Nybert. Yeah, okay.
Kenny Nybert.
You can say whatever you want about Kenny.
He's not going to listen to this. Kenny, I had another brain thing where I was trying to think of Kenny, and my brain defaulted to Phil.
Okay.
Sorry. Where Kenny Nybert, I can't remember what we were talking about. We were talking about something, and Kenny was like, normal people, and he meant straight people. And I'm like, Kenny.
Kenneth.
So Emily, what are your feelings on the Mike Nichols queer?
It's interesting because I think, like, as someone who writes things and
Sure.
is often like writing characters who are not necessarily from my specific background, but
Mhm,
especially on the TV show I work on.
mhm.
I'm often like trying to figure out where's the overlap between me and this person. When I sit down to write a novel and I'm like trying to create a character who is not a white lady, you know, I'm
Sure.
often being like, okay, well, what do I have in common with this person? And I always want to like have like something, a strong thread that I can sort of like hang on to.
Uh-huh.
That like, and I think what is interesting is Mike Nichols is so good at presenting queer experiences in certain cases because he is very interested as an artist, and I think because of his story of who he was as a person, in the things that people keep hidden from the world, in the things that people repress inside themselves. And that's the
Sure.
great theme of his work. It's there in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a play that is, not on its surface a queer play. It's there in a lot of the stage stuff he did. It's there in The Graduate. It's there in Carnal Knowledge. It's when he gets away from talking about that level of repression, that way that human beings often to function in society in a way that is necessary, tamp down pieces of themselves and hide themselves. When he gets away from that is when he's making shit like Day of the Dolphin, where you're like, okay, man, go for it. But like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what always, like, one of the reasons I think he worked so well on stage and why he could always go back to the theaters, because the theater is a medium that really rewards stories about people who are hiding some piece of themselves in a way that like film sometimes can struggle with, because film is so in your face. So I think that that's why he's such a good queer
Makes sense.
storyteller, especially at the time he's telling these stories, because something like The Birdcage is about people who have to hide some piece of themselves to function in this story that's being told. And like Mike Nichols might not exactly understand what it is to pretend to be a woman to like appease your conservative in-laws, but he can like understand the impulse that would lead to that, you know?
Sure. I absolutely. I agree with all of that. I think that, you know, it's so interesting because I do feel like on some level, because obviously we have a couple more episodes, Emily, to cover of Mike Nichols. He does two other films after this. Um, that on some level you're like, this should have just been the end of his
Actually,
career.
weird sidebar,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
that
yeah.
The Birdcage is the one movie I can think of where trans women don't get upset about the whole thing. Like,
Huh. Really?
it's like I've heard, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but when people are when my people are
Okay.
talking about,
When your people.
all of these times that there were like gender bending
Yeah.
performances or cis people playing trans people or whatever in that period, nobody gets really mad about Nathan Lane in The Birdcage. Like, I think it's because the situation is so obviously farcical, and also he's a really great performer having a really great time.
Do
And
they get
my
upset about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert?
not I think there's like a line that drag sometimes
Mm.
can like walk that doesn't make us mad, but there are times when it is the drag gets very over the top, and then it does feel,
Like Tu
and I
Wong
think
Fu.
this is a longer conversation that we don't need
Yeah.
to have right
We'll
now,
we'll
but
have
like
it another time.
a
Yeah.
lot of like trans women have a complicated relationship with drag. I think that drag has a wonderful like space within the queer community, but I also understand why some people do not. But anyway, please, Adam, you want to say something?
Well, I would say the thing about that's interesting about both The Birdcage and I think to a lesser extent Angels of America is that I remember at the time The Birdcage came out, there were gay men who had a big problem with Nathan Lane's performance. There was a lot of internalized homophobia in that, but there was also the sense of like, really, this is going to be like a major studio comedy, and you're going to have this like
Right.
complete stereotype, like prancing around, mincing in like if like out of the 50s, and and they couldn't. And the thing about Mike Nichols' work is that when you go back and you watch what Nathan Lane's actually doing,
Mhm.
that there's the surface performance, and then there's everything that's happening inside of that and underneath that, to Emily's point. And I think similarly, I remember there was some, like my friend Doug had an issue with Justin Kirk's performance, especially as Pryor. But there's also just this sense of like, I don't buy Ben Schenkman as a gay man. I don't buy like Patrick Wilson as a gay man. It's just not real. And then now that like the pressure of being one of the only kinds of representations of gay men there is gone. There's a vast array of different kinds of performances played by queer actors, played by straight actors. You know, that pressure's gone. I can fully just sort of access what those actors are trying to do on its own merit. And I think each of them are really giving a very deep and textured and complicated performance. My favorite of which is Ben Schenkman. I think he is like you mentioned that like you were surprised that Patrick Wilson that Justin Kirk didn't come up bigger thing. I am like Ben Schenkman should have like he's like it's almost like a god tier performance. He is as good as anybody else in that, and doing very, very complicated, nuanced, intricate, self-contradictory, like
well, I wanted to ask about him because I want to ask both of you about him because I always find myself very empathetic to Lewis's situation. And I say that because I am a person who is I'm a hypochondriac. I find myself
surprising. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about you. What?
Really? You didn't know that?
That should be our bit. That should be. Oh,
really? You're a neurotic Jewish writer? But yeah. So Lewis is the scene we mentioned earlier about him talking to the rabbi about abandoning someone in their time of need, and that idea of how scared he is of disease and how scared he is of all of these things and scared of his own mortality, and him grappling with that and loving Pryor and wanting desperately to be there for him and yet knowing he's incapable of it, is so he's so tormented, right? Like he's just so, you know, the at the end of the diner scene we talk about where he has this like mark of Cain where he fell down the stairs and he feels as though the world is against him and he's so self-loathing, and I feel for him, and yet at the same time he's so intrinsically narcissistic on top of everything. Like it as you just said, Adam, he's playing all of this, which makes him such a hard character to love, but at the same time you're like, but he's so human and he's so like broken and sad, and you talk about the two sides of him and how I think it's really interesting how, and forgive me for using these terminologies, I'm a stupid white cis male, so forgive me, but like how kind of butch he is with Pryor and how kind of femme he is with Joe. This idea that there's kind of this sort of,
and yet at the
on
same
the spectrum
time,
of it, you know what I'm saying?
I totally hear what you're like. You're absolutely right. And at the same time, to talk about this contradictory impulses, he's more butch with Pryor, but he's also much less confident. Even before he learns about like even in those like that early scene, he's more neurotic, much less like more unsure of himself. Whereas from the moment he meets Joe, he's
the alpha.
He's the alpha. He's leading the conversation. He's the one who's leading the flirtation. He's the one who takes the risk of kissing him. You know, so like the contradictions of Lewis feel like Tony Kushner is working something out about a certain kind of intellectual liberal that who is very high-minded, but whose scruples are spongy at best. And I think that is a type of person that is still very much in the world today. And I think it's very rare that you see that particular kind of contradictory set of attributes performed and written and directed in a way that feels completely like you believe it, lived in and believable the entire time. You just like, this is a person that I have a version of whom I have known and met and have sometimes been uh
Drawn to?
a bit like drawn to, but also just been myself.
Sure,
Like,
sure, sure.
like in some ways, neurotic uh Jewish men are like like one of my main types
Your
as
kryptonite?
my kryptonite. As you know, I am not Jewish myself. I have been accused of being Jewish, for
Accused
being
is an interesting choice.
accused truly, for as neurotic as I can be.
Sure,
And
sure.
like every time it's brought to me, it's like, you're not saying this as a nice thing. You're like, you're calling me, the
Yeah,
tone with which this is presented to me
yeah,
is like,
yeah,
wait, you're not Jewish? Like,
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's, I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's,
yeah. What were you gonna say,
yeah.
Emily?
Yeah, sorry, Emily. I was spinning out there, so please rescue me.
I think one of the things that's interesting about Lewis, and
Yeah.
we've all been in the meeting with some executive who's like, but how are we going to love this person, or like
Yes.
Yeah,
how are we
yes,
going to
yes. Yeah, yeah.
and like the thing I find so relatable about Lewis is that he's all of my worst impulses. He's all of everyone watching. You have that bad impulse inside yourself to be weak, to be not capable of staying with someone who's dying. All of these
To be
things,
selfish, to
Yeah, yeah,
be,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
non-committal. Yeah.
And like it is that, but
Horny.
it requires a level of commitment that is kind of almost needs to be developed in tandem with the actor, which is why I
Uh-huh.
think stage is so much more forgiving of this than sometimes film can be, because the actor and the playwright are often working very closely together
Yeah.
across rehearsal, and then it gets ground down into something like this. I also think that Lewis is like, especially the Democracy in America scene, is like an interesting examination of America's relationship to Judaism, and the way that like most European countries, somewhere in their list of original sins is anti-Semitism. And America's original sin has always been something to do with racism. Like we have, obviously we have a long history of anti-Semitism here too, not to like discount that, but it is kind of like this thing where if you start talking about like the terrible things America has done, that's down the list somewhere. And yet like it's not like it doesn't exist. And it feels like Lewis is constantly like trying to like figure out how to navigate that conundrum of,
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Phil. You're
yeah.
Jewish.
Well, I think he is definitely. I mean, that diner scene is obviously such a powerful attempt at him to kind of work through his racist things. I mean, Belize calls him out on a lot of them, but
Yep.
there's a lot of this like, but I'm not racist. But the things you just said were pretty racist,
Mhm.
and this kind of um it's a little bit of Lewis being like, Jews are hated too. Don't you
Mhm.
understand how much we're hated as well? And it's like, but it first of all, it's not a competition. There's no winner in this situation. Like that's just part of the problems of the world, specifically this country. Um, you know, and Belize tells that wonderful story about the paperback that he's reading,
Yeah.
and the whole like Thaddeus says real love isn't ever ambivalent. Like this,
Yeah.
all this stuff is just flowing in that scene, and Lewis can't control it. Like there's this great line that I think about all the time that Belize says about how arguing with Lewis is like throwing darts at a glob of jello. There's no satisfying hits, just quivering. And I mean, first of all, beautifully written, but also so visual. And you're like, I absolutely understand, because you can see him there, like just quivering in his own skin of just sort of this self-loathing, but also self-love. Like he's just a phenomenal character. And all of these reasons are why I think he's so lovable in a weird
And he
fucking way.
does, and he also has a real arc. The thing that's interesting is
Yeah.
like Roy Cohn has a particular arc
Mm-hmm.
where he doesn't change
Mm-hmm.
per se. He just gets sicker.
Mm-hmm.
But his but there's a sort of diminishment that he has to contend with, and
Sure.
has a really have and has really struggles to figure out how to contend with.
In
And
the face of a gay black man on top of
yeah,
everything else, like
yep,
needing his help.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Joe has an arc,
Yes.
and again,
A
that is
sad one.
a very sad, tragic arc. I mean,
Yes.
he starts as a, like that. Joe is, I think, the biggest one of the biggest representations of how hollowing the closet is. And
Sure.
that like in most media, I think that like the what like how you are met, how you meet him, and
Mm-hmm.
what he sort of states as his purpose in life from the
Mm-hmm.
start, he's already kind of lost himself, and he never,
Absolutely.
and he,
He's self-flagellating himself, right? Like
yeah.
he's going through all that. Sorry, I didn't mean to
But he
interrupt
also, like, not to like jump on what your next guest is going to be talking about, but
you. Mm-hmm.
like he tries to redeem himself in Lewis, which is
Correct.
in some ways like trying to throw a dart into Jello. Like, you're just not, Lewis is in no way going to be the vessel for your
No.
self-discovery. And once Lewis understands who actually is and what Joe's
Yeah.
done, that is for it, it is as tragic and sad as
Mm-hmm.
Joe's arc is, there is a sort of triumphant for Lewis
Mm-hmm.
arc to him. And what's interesting is that the midpoint of this whole thing, which is how Millennium Approaches ends, is when Lewis and Joe finally come together.
Well, and to
And
piggyback on
like
that,
finally
in the
finally begin their relationship.
well, yeah, like basically they meet in Central Park, and you have this. I think dovetails nicely with what you're saying about how Lewis asks Joe about the story of Lazarus, and Joe says that Jesus breathed life into him and brought him back from the dead, which is clearly what he's looking for Lewis to do for
Yeah.
him. And unfortunately, that is not going to work because he's going to the worst possible source to have life breathed
Well,
into him.
Lewis
But
is
he doesn't
needing
know
that
that.
himself.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. Yeah,
they're both looking for that in each other.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
they're both very lost people, one
Sure.
of whom is accepting of who he is as a gay man,
Mm-hmm.
and one of whom is not, and
Absolutely.
doesn't seem to be able to, and is totally like wrecked inside. And I'm actually, Emily, I'm curious for you. You alluded to earlier, like you knew people like Joe.
Mhm.
I'm like, for you, the closetiness of that character, how does that play for you?
I'm interested. It's interesting because I obviously like lived in a closet of
Mm,
my own for a long
Sure.
time. It's just not it's not exactly analogous because what's happening here is like there is not a space in which Joe and Harper can have a satisfying sexual relationship. I certainly have known gay men slash lesbians who were in heterosexual relationships and had children, had sex, but it was clear that like there was something that wasn't working there. And I was in a relationship where fundamentally like we had to shift how we thought about it, but it still was like going to function as a relationship and was helped by me becoming more myself. But certainly the idea of like, here is this piece of yourself that you can't share with anybody that you love, and like that is keeping you from being not just able to love more honestly, but able to be loved more honestly, that I think is so starkly portrayed in Joe. And then the way that that corrodes other people around you, the way it corrodes Harper, the way it corrodes even his mother, the way it corrodes Lewis to some extent. I think that this one of the great ideas of Angels in America is like the American theater is full of plays about families coming together, and Angels in America is sort of like thinking about what the family unit looks like when you don't have the traditional mother father children setup.
It's found family
Yeah,
instead.
and like the place where it ends is like this is what a family could look like. That final scene in the park
So
where you have four characters who at the start of the play are in a very different place and now they're essentially have formed a family. And like this is but also, it sort of has to look at, what role does Joe have in that? What role does Harper have in that? And like how is the family hurt by this element of deep dishonesty that is the closet? And I say that and it sounds like a judgment on people who are closeted for whatever reason, or like can't come to terms with it for themselves, or like are hiding something. And I think that there are many good reasons to do that across the spectrum of different identities, and yet there's a corrosion to it. There's always a way that that rubs away and sort of erodes
mhm.
something fundamental in yourselves. And I think that Kushner is so good at tapping into that. And like Yeah, one of the reasons I want to play Harper when I become a great actor in my next life, is because I think like she's one of the great women of American theater. And like, it is so rare that a man can write a woman that well. And Tony Kushner nailed it in one.
I want to just to piggyback on what you're both saying. I don't want to gloss over one of my favorite parts of this miniseries, which is we have this very sort of sad scene where Joe calls his mom from a payphone in the middle of Central Park in the middle of the night, while cruising for men, if you will, and it's sort of through tears tells her that he's gay, and she completely ignores him and just says, "Well, of course you're old enough to know your father didn't love you." Like she just breezes past it. It's a utterly brutal scene.
She breezes past it with like a shotgun to the head.
Correct.
She not only just sort of like tries to ignore it, she's like,
she wounds him in a completely different way.
Of course you were, I had a loveless father. You should know
like,
that.
It's her first scene as well.
Yeah.
It's Hannah's first scene. It's a brutal scene, which leads into one of my favorite parts, which is the cross-cutting between Joe and Harper, and Joe essentially confessing that he's gay, and that he is quote unquote the man in the other room with the knife, and cross-cut with Lewis breaking up with Pryor in the hospital room. This is how the second chapter, episode, however you want to call it, ends. And this cross-cutting between both amazing scenes, but something else that I don't want to breeze over this. There's so much we talk for hours about this, but there is this thing about justice and the law, and this what we have built as democracy, as human beings of right and wrong and good and evil. And baked into this, you have Lewis and Joe, who both work at the courthouse, or whatever you want to call it. And so you have like Pryor sort of banging his bowl on his bedside table, being like the judge and jury in this situation, and saying this man's heart is deficient. He loves, but his love is worth nothing. And you have Lewis begging him and saying, like, you can love someone and fail them. Like it's just really powerful stuff that's so deeply human, and all like tight close-ups or mediums. Like, you're just in these people's faces as they're basically, these four people are begging for forgiveness and begging to be loved in the most sort of horrific of emotional circumstances, or physical, for Pryor. It's amazing. And then the last line of the chapter is Pryor saying to the nurse, "I hurt all over." It's one of my favorite sort of crescendos of these 6 chapters. I think it's done so well. But to sort of,
I just wanted to sort of like, first of all, I agree, and I think you're absolutely right about that sequence, and that's Mike Nichols firing on all cylinders. That's like when 100%. Like that is like where he lives. That kind of scene, that kind of sequence is what he is best known for and best at.
Yes.
And I think also, I wanted to return a little bit to what you were talking about, Emily, because I think
Salute.
Emily is saluting you.
Because I think that scene gets at what is so interesting to me about Joe as a character, because a lot of other depictions of the closet are focused on the internal anguish of the person who's closeted. And if it pays attention to the collateral damage that can do to other people in that person's life, it's often sort of in peripheral. It's not really. Whereas Harper, but then also like what happens with Lewis, and how that ultimately does sort of affect Pryor. And then, when Pryor and Belize sneak into the courthouse to like figure out who is, like in Perestroika, like who is who's shacking up with Lewis. Oh my God, it's the Marlboro Man. Like it's like it, and that's why like you have to cast Patrick Wilson in that role because but like it, there's an empathy. This is what I was going to earlier. This goes to like my grand unifying theory about this. There's an empathy for all of that, for all of what Joe's going through, for all of, but like, and then, but also for how what Joe's going through inflicts real damage to
Mhm.
like people that he knows and people that he's never met. And like, his crisis strands his mother so that she has to literally like wander into the Bronx before she can like figure out what to do. And like, but her inability to engage with him as a homosexual person is also what caused, like, there's just reverberations all around. And I think that that is one of the many reasons why this work is so, still feels so relevant and so connected to the where we are at even today, even as the world has moved past this particular kind of closetiness as the default.
Mhm.
you know
I agree. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm thinking a lot. Like, I think a lot about this because one of the themes of um God, it's too far away. I'm just trying to grab it. One of the themes of
Themes of,
woodworking, a novel
I was
by
gonna say,
Emily St. James, it's available in bookstores everywhere, is about like the closet. And I remember reading a review of the book by a fellow trans woman who really liked it and was like, one of the strands of the book is this woman who comes out to herself at 35 and starts transitioning, and her ex-wife is like just it utterly like reconceptualizes their relationship. And the person like who read it was like, why is this so much about the ex-wife? And to me, like, the ex-wife is like as important as a part of that story because they never got a chance to have a marriage because there wasn't anything real there. And of course, once they are able to like have a real connection, then other things can happen. But like there's another section of the book that is deliberately kind of in conversation I'm realizing how much Tony Kushner evidently is just what I want to be when I grow up. So but yeah, there's another section of the book that is very interested in the closet and in the ways that it can manifest differently for trans people from how it say manifests for gays and lesbians. But yeah, I think I knew so many people growing up who I would bet anything now were queer and deeply closeted and just like not able to look at that. And now a lot of them are dead. And I'm like, did they ever have a life? Or did they have kind of a half-life that they lived in a shadow? And like, how many other people did they hurt along the way just because they refused to be honest with themselves? Spouses, children, friends, parents, you know?
and
I mean, that's one of the tragedies of Joe's character for sure.
yeah, and like he feels trapped because of his circumstances, because of his upbringing, because like I think that that exchange with his mother as the first time you meet her is so important to understanding what formed Joe and what caused Joe to be so like tied up in knots, because he was, you know from as a child, his emotional life was stunted. So I, I think, I think what we're trying to say is that this is a really good
Yeah, it's a
piece.
very, very good.
It's
Yeah,
excellent.
I
Yeah.
I want to say just
It's well
one
done. I
other
would, yeah. B
one other very
plus.
quick thing. Just in terms of piggybacking on what you guys are saying, mixed into all of this, you have Joe being preyed upon by a complete monster in the form,
Yes.
obviously, of Roy Cohn. And you have that moment where Roy is just blatantly hitting on him at the bar and he's rubbing his back. And then the camera does this sort of crazy undercranked shot through the window, through the trees, into sort of this den of debauchery or whatever's going on in Central Park at that time. And it's shot very gothically. I mean, it literally looks like it could be in Wolf, if I'm being
Mhm.
completely frank. Like it is shot, all the stuff in Central Park has these gothic, shadowy. It literally feels like it's out of a horror movie in a lot of ways, and it has this sort of dialed up notion to it. But I do think that Joe having this perverse father figure, if you will, in the form of Roy Cohn, is also a complete mind fuck too, right? Like Joe is dealing with all these feelings that he can't really comprehend. He has that really lovely scene with Harper. He talks about Jacob versus the angel, and that idea of like the angel's not human, it holds nothing back. How can a human win? What kind of fight is that? It's not just. There's a lot of ideas of just and justice and fairness and how the world isn't a fair place. And I think that Joe is really at the center of that, right? Like he is just a paralyzed by indecision and fear and longing that he can't in any way really, live with.
And he's not self-aware at all. Sorry, Emily. I like because Roy clocks him as gay from the moment he steps into his office in that first scene. Like the exchange where he's like on the phone with the person who's looking for Broadway tickets, and he's like, "Lakash, you would hate it." And then to Joe, he's like, "Lakash, fabulous. Have you seen it's best thing on Broadway maybe ever." And you don't say that to someone that you don't think is gonna, in some level, get you. And so when like later in that scene, Joe says, "I have to talk to my wife," there's this beat that Pacino plays so well where he's like, "Your wife, good, go do that." Like, just like, and I overplayed that. Like he like just, because I'm not.
You're not Al Pacino.
I'm not Emily St. James. I'm not a great.
We can't all be Emily St. James.
We can't. Yeah. So but like it's from the start, Roy pegs, metaphorically, Joe as gay, and that like that's its own sort of like there's this sense of, for anybody who was closeted and you realize that people clocked you before you clocked yourself. That is its own, that can sometimes feel validating, but it can also sometimes feel very violating. And so I think that that's an interesting dynamic as well.
And then mixed into that, you have sort of this big fight that they have at the end of the third part, where Roy is rejected, where basically Joe says, "I'm not taking the job. I'm going to stay with my wife. She needs me." And that rejection just brings out full fucking monster,
volcanic,
just the worst possible thing.
When I was in high school, I had guys who I would make out with, and they clearly thought I was a gay man, and like it was a situation where I could like live with that level of disconnect, because on some level I knew that wasn't true. I was like Roy Cohn, but no,
I think you were not like Roy Cohn.
But then there was a guy who. And I don't even know how to explain it to this day. I can't quite say what I'm talking about. I can't quite explain it, but like he kissed me like I was a girl, and that freaked me out. I cut him off cold turkey because I was like, I cannot deal with this. It's just like, and like I think, I see a lot of myself in Joe, which is a wonderful thing to say about oneself.
I mean,
come back next week, folks.
Lewis, come back next week. Anyway, just to wrap this up, at the end of the episode, we have sort of this kind of, I mean, it's a great cliffhanger. Obviously, it's a build up towards the angel showing up. You also have this. There's Ethel Rosenberg shows up. the apparition of Ethel Rosenberg, some manifestation of Ethel Rosenberg shows up. The moment when she picks up the phone and goes, "Ooh, buttons, such things they have now," and then she says, "It sings." That is my grandmother, like to a T. Everything about that sort of old country up talk that existed, of a generation that doesn't anymore, unfortunately. But then she says that wonderful line, "History is about to crack wide open." And you really just, that's the stuff that oddly I take hope from this piece, of this idea that the great work begins, history's cracking wide open, change is inevitable, change is possible. All that stuff is what I love about this. And it's a great place for this sort of bifurcation of these two parts, I think.
Do you want to know which characters in this that the good people of AO3 want to see fuck are?
Sure.
Most of the explicitly sexual fanfics about Angels in America are about Lewis and Pryor. But the
That tracks.
runner up is that people want to see Belize and Pryor get together, and I get it.
I get it. I mean,
I
they
think-
did.
Well, they
have
did.
a past.
They have a past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
My jaw hurts at the thought of it, or something like that.
congratulations to AO3.
AO3 for nailing it. No pun intended.
That is a kind of research, Emily, that I hadn't thought to do. And
that's why Emily's the best in the biz.
Yeah, and so you have tonight opened a door for me into a new echelon of research of, like, if I'm going to look into a topic, I need to.
I do this, I do this all the time. Ever since I used to do this podcast, and I would look on AO3 to see who people were shipping. That was always like interesting. I'd never read the stories for the obvious reasons, but I'd be like, "Well, they're shipping those two. Interesting."
That's amazing. I really like that.
The couples that people ship on Yellow Jackets are so bizarre to me.
Yeah,
but you know what?
You know
what? The queer girls got to find their love somewhere. So
do what you got to do. Adam, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you.
This.
I mean, we only talked for like 2.5 hours.
I know,
right? And that's barely. We didn't go past how long it is to sit through this first half. So
it is wonderful. I'll say there's a line. Since we've been going for almost 2.5 hours, Prior Walter #2 says the 20th century, oh dear, the world has got so terribly, terribly old. And I do feel like maybe our listeners are feeling that way about this episode, but we can talk for
I don't know what
we
you
can
mean.
talk forever about it. It's, I mean, I'm just, Emily can attest to this. I texted Emily probably, I don't know, maybe almost a year ago now. And I was like, I know we don't do TV, Emily, but can we please do Angels in America? I was like, I'm begging you. And she's like, let's just do Nichols. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
So, we broke our movie mold to do this. That's how much I wanted to talk about this. And it
opens with a Mike Nichols film.
It does.
Right.
It does.
So,
but I also just think that you can't talk about the 2000s without talking about this. It really does feel like it's such a seismic piece of work.
I think we'll probably talk about this more next week, because I'm sure we're going to be talking about the awards narrative of this, but it does feel
Joe Reed, yes.
A lot of reviews I've read of this have been like, this feels a little forgotten now, and I do think it has kind of been set aside a little bit in the grand story of HBO, but we'll talk about that more next week.
We'll talk about that next week. Joe Reed will be joining us to talk about Perestroika, and
you better believe Joe and I have been texting each other like, we're America buddies.
That makes me so happy to hear that. Yeah, I'm listen, I can't think of two people that I wouldn't want that are top of my list to talk about this. So
that's a real honor. That actually means a lot to me.
No,
thank you. This was such a wonderful conversation to be able to have with you both. So thank you for having me
so much. And are there any pieces that have come out recently or will be coming out that people should be aware of? This is literally coming out next week.
Oh wow. Wow. I mean, I've recorded things that have yet to, that you still haven't aired. I feel like no. I'm joking.
That's not true.
I'm joking. But no. Well, then if go to variety.com for all coverage of Stranger Things. That's kind of what I like. Sure. Like that's like most of my job right now. I just did a big cover story on it with my colleague Kate Arthur, and there will be much more coverage to come. And that's really there are other things I'm doing, but that's really the thing that I'm doing right now is covering Stranger Things. So
how strange are the things now?
They're quite strange. And I have seen, I can say, I think, well, I'm just going to say, I've seen the first 4 episodes of the final season, and they slap. So their things are strange. They're the stranger things, and it's very entertaining. So, and then go to Variety to read more about it.
I'm excited to have it back. I'm excited, hopefully, for them to land this plane. So people should check that out and follow you on various other things. If they
Adam B. Vera and Blue Sky is where you can really find me. Yeah,
I do love that every time one of these shows that has kids in it ends, and they're now like so much older, everyone's like, and they're all parents now, and that's actually true for Millie Bobby Brown. She is a mother.
She's a mother.
Has her own child now.
She is her own child.
Oh boy. Adam, thank you again. Truly, this was an absolute joy. Emily, I can't wait to dive into part 2 with you.
Oh, it's going to be great. There's going to be so many death-defying stunts.
So many stunts.
Yeah.
People don't know it. It's all stunts. The second episode.
We're going to get the Golden Globe for best stunts in a podcast.
All right. Thank you again, Adam. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.